Alright, for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, the founders of Creed, and of course, five-time CEO, 60 plus angel investments, fear guru using BOODA doctrine to help create 1,000 unicorns. Oh my goodness, I love that 1,000 unicorns. None other than Mr. Patrick Sweeney.
Thank you, Daniel. It's so great to be here and be with a fellow North American.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Patrick, being on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Sure, Daniel. I think for your audience sake, I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, and very much in an Irish blue collar neighborhood. And I've started, as you said, 5 companies with 3 good exits, and have also advised or helped or invested in now more than 70 different companies. So a lot of experience as a venture capital operating partner, so helping portfolio companies to scale, and want to build 1,000 unicorns with people I work with, and I've got 4 already who are unicorns that I've helped get there or invested in, and pretty excited about that as well. So the book is a follow-on to my last book. My last book was called Fear is Fuel, and the Founder's Creed is using all that fear research and some of the research around conviction and belief to drive this new book and to drive success, because belief is what determines speed, and then speed is what determines who wins and which startups will go from being sort of a nice little lifestyle company to a unicorn.
Mr. Patrick, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you. The title introduces idea of creed rather than strategy. Why is a fundamental or foundational belief system more powerful for founders than simply a business plan?
So, Daniel, it's one of the things that people don't talk a lot about, but belief, and that's the first phase of the Buddha loop that the Founders Creed is built on. The Buddha loop doctrine starts with that B and belief is, like I said, what determines speed, but it's also what determines conviction and eliminates doubt. So the higher your conviction, the lower your doubt is, the faster your speed of decision making makes. So one of the big things that holds companies back is they're constantly arguing over the same thing. I had a startup from MIT that I was helping out, and they literally took 6 hours deciding on one component of their logo when they got new logo iterations. 6 hours, and
Mm.
it was just tremendous. So oftentimes that lack of belief, it, excuse me, and the lack of a creed, something that everybody agrees on as to how the company should be run and how the company should scale, holds people back. And oftentimes I'll tell the story about Steve Jobs wearing his black mock turtleneck, or Zuck wearing his gray hoodie. They take away the decision making component for getting dressed every morning. The decision's already made. They make it once, and that's it, and that saves them from decision fatigue, because we all get tired of making decisions, and we should save our ability to make great decisions, our resources, for things that are really important. And part of the Founders Creed is that if you get those things straight with your founders, and then as the company scales, everybody understands them, then you won't have to be making decisions 5 times, 10 times. You won't have what I call the illusion of agreement. And I can tell you more about that in a little bit.
Definitely. The late Steve just said, only crazy people change the world. So if you're crazy, you're changing the world, Mr. Patrick. Forge the unshakable implies this is an active, often difficult process. What does the forging look like in a practice for entrepreneur in the first year?
So in the first year, Daniel, that's such an important time for entrepreneurs, because they have this belief, right, that this is what the future could look like in 5 years or 10 years. And use any successful founder as that person. Use Elon Musk. I believe that we can make a car that's only driven on electric power, that's faster than a Porsche, that only costs $35,000. And the rest of the world, and General Motors and Ford and other people said, you're crazy. This is how the world is today. And so between that belief of the founder and the way the world is today is what I call the belief gap. And when you cross that gap, you've got to cross it with internal partners, so employees and investors, and you've got to cross it with external partners as well, so customers and analysts and journalists, press. So you're trying to build internal belief and you're trying to build external belief as you cross that belief gap, as you go from your vision of the world and where you know it can be to the way the rest of the world sees it. And as you start to build up that belief, that internal and external belief, you start to build value in the company. And you're going to hit a lot of obstacles as you go through, but as the Stoics say, the obstacle is the way, right? It's not trying to get around them, it's not trying to avoid them. It's trying to take what those obstacles are teaching you and follow that as the way forward. And when you start to get a team that's cohesive in building these ability to overcome these obstacles and get closer to closing that belief gap, that's when you really start to get that flywheel moving and momentum and having a lot of fun because you know you're winning.
Definitely. I like Elon Musk craziness to
Yeah.
go beyond our Mother Earth. I hope that will be a first step to go beyond our solar system. Many business books focus on agility and pivoting. How do you reconcile being unshakable in your core with the need of flexible in a changing market?
So when you look at how the Buddha doctrine starts out to define a company, one of the things that we do is what I call a shared belief map. And the shared belief map is part of what drives your company on a daily basis. And what you do is you sit down with your executive team and you figure out those things that are the core values of the company. And the core values are only truth. So, for instance, I'm working with a medical monitoring company in Cambridge that I write about in the Founders Creed. And they all sat down and they had three founders. One of them was a cardiologist, the other was a sales MBA guy, and the third was she was a developer. And they all sat down and they all had the same words in mind. This is the illusion of agreement. They all thought they should be innovative. They all thought they should be agile. They all thought that they should be customer centric, and they all thought they should be to the highest standard of medicine. So those were sort of their four key tenets that they were thinking of, but it meant something different for each one of the three people. So being the highest quality for the cardio surgeon, the cardiovascular surgeons, she said, we need to get clinical trials and we need to get proofs published in medical journals like Lancet. And that was her vision of what it meant. The sales guy, the MBA, said, no, we need to be able to get people up and running in 10 minutes so they can use the app and start to get benefit from it. It doesn't need to be clinical tested. But they thought it was they were using the same words. So that's the illusion of agreement. When you sit down and make that shared belief map that I walk you through in the book, what you're doing is you're taking the core beliefs, so things that can't change. And for this company, MedExit, they were in Massachusetts, and they knew that the Massachusetts government was going to fund 300,000 individuals to get remote monitoring and telehealth. So that's a core ideology that's not going to change. The government has already agreed that. So it's a fact. That goes into your core ideology. Now you've got another column called hypotheses. That's where you put all the other stuff. So the hypotheses we came up with, the first one was we can get 20% market share of those 300,000 patients. Of those 300,000, 60,000 can get on the MedExit platform. So because that's a hypothesis, you have to test it every day. So you're constantly testing that hypothesis to see if it's true. And if it's not true, and you're going through these iterative loops, this is what the Buddha loop is called: believe, observe, orient, decide, and act. And so as you're going through those loops every week with all the new information you're gaining, you're getting a huge competitive advantage against everyone else in the industry. Because every time you go through that loop and you iterate, You get more data back, and that's data your competitors don't have.
On the market domination strategy, Mr. Patrick, dominate your market is a bold goal. How do you define domination in a way that realistic for a startup, not just a tech giant?
So when I say dominate your market, I think you should have the major market share of any competitor. So if you look at a startup, one of the best things that you can do is redesign the whole category. So not get put in the same category that are existing, because what you're doing is so different from the way the world is today, and you're looking at the way the world's going to be 10 years from now. A great example of this is a Swiss company actually called NextThink, and they were originally doing desktop support services and IT consulting, and kind of a typical body shop, and they got labeled as IT consultants, and they got put in that category. But they started to notice that when they were working with the people in the data center, they had trouble provisioning, and so they were on the phone with the help desk for 2 hours every day going through provisioning. Then they noticed that the people in HR, human resources, had trouble accessing databases, and the databases were always crashing, and they were wasting time rebooting the database. Then they noticed something else in a different department, something else in a different department. And they said, hey, all these employees are really affected by this negative technology performance. We want to do something called employee experience, employee electronic experience. And they came up with their own category of how they can look at employee interaction with technology. And that was something totally different that didn't exist. So when they went to Gartner and they said, hey, we want this to be all about employee experience with technology, Gartner said, well, no, we're going to put you back in IT consulting. And they kept pushing and they kept pushing because they saw this new category, and they were the leaders in that category, and they still are today. It's one of the most recent unicorns to come out of Switzerland, Lausanne, at the university called EPFL. It's where the company started, which is kind of like the MIT of Switzerland.
Interesting. Mr. Patrick, your book suggests a creed is key to domination. Can you give an example of a company's core belief directly translate into a competitive advantage that crosses more tactical rivals?
I think, Daniel, if I had to point to one, it would probably be Netflix, because they rocked Silicon Valley. Like
True.
people were so divided when their internal creed was released. So they have this 150 or 125 slide presentation that's all about their creed, and it says, if you're not top performing, if you're not in the top 50%, you should expect to be fired, from a performance perspective. And we reward performance and meritocracy. We don't reward tenure and the time you've been in the company. And they said, this is not a family. This is a team. They have all these components of their creed. And when that leaked out to the rest of the world, half the people, which is exactly what you want, half the people said, I'd never work for this company. It sounds like this incredible, horrible dystopia, and I don't want anything to do with it. And the other half of the people said, geez, I love that. They're stripping out all the bullshit. Everything looks great. I want to work for that company. And that's exactly what you want your creed to do. So in my first big company, which was the first real cloud hosting company that had security on it, called Server Vault, this was 4 years before Amazon Web Services, AWS, came about. At Server Vault, I had a founding partner who was the polar opposite of me. He was the chief financial officer of the largest credit card company in the world, Capital One. And he wanted to get into the sort of technology revolution and join a startup. So he originally came as an investor for me, then joined as our CFO. And he could look at a spreadsheet like he was reading tea leaves. It was just incredible. He was super meticulous. He knew everything about corporate governance and strategy for accounting and treasury and all this stuff that I didn't know anything about. I was the tech guy with the vision. So we were completely different in our skill set and our ability. We were 100% aligned on our creed. So we both believed that employees should be treated like family. We both believed that honesty and hard work and treating your customers right were all the top values we wanted. So we were very well aligned from a value perspective, from a creed perspective, completely different in our skill sets and our vision and the way that we did projects and even the way we interacted with people. But having that creed for alignment is what gives you that unshakable belief. Even if you have to pivot and change in technology and you don't believe in the same thing that you started out with, which happens with most startups. And if you look at it, what you start out with your first MVP or your first prototype is nothing like what you end up with when you become a unicorn.
Mr. Patrick, on mindset and the inner game, what are the key pillars of the unshakable mindset? Is it about resilience, conviction, clarity, or a blend of something else?
So Daniel, I'd have to say that the key pillars of that sort of mindset is really courage. So learning how to deal with fear, and that's a scientific base. That's not something that's necessarily touchy feely, because we know exactly how the human brain works. And that brings me to the second point, which is being comfortable with uncertainty. So the human brain is a prediction engine.
Mm.
Everything that we do as we go through our day, about 80% of what we do is subconscious. And that 20% is really what takes the most work, because we're not relying on our subconscious reactions to do it. But having that subconscious reaction, we predict as we walk through our day. So we predict that when we walk into a room and we flip on the light switch, that the light's going to come on with maybe a 95% certainty. And maybe we'd predict that there's a 5% chance the light won't come on. If the light doesn't come on, then we further predict, okay, what's next? That the light bulb is out, and that's an 80% chance of that, and that the circuit breaker is switched, and there's a 20% chance of that. So this is how we go through the day as a prediction engine. We do the same thing in a startup, and we think, okay, we're going to go to this venture capitalist and they're going to give us this kind of feedback or that kind of feedback. And you're trying to predict what happens. When things go wrong or go awry or we can't predict them, that uncertainty triggers what's called the amygdala, the fear center in your brain. And when it triggers that amygdala, we have this fight, flight, or freeze response. And it takes over our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's our intelligent part. And when it does, we can't think right. We can't think straight. And this, you've seen this happen, maybe when you've been close to a car accident, when you've been in a fight with your partner, doesn't matter. But we've all had amygdala triggering. And it's really a 2 million-year-old piece of software on our brain that we're running. So we can retrain that. We can retrain the amygdala to be able to deal with fear and uncertainty. And I think that's a huge pillar to success, is being able to deal with that, with that change in mindset. And that leads to all sorts of things like grit, which Angela Duckworth talks so well about when she did her study on the West Point cadets. So there's a lot of things that courage is the virtue and the pillar that everything else stems from. If you don't have that, then you don't have accountability, you don't have courage, you don't have grit, you don't have resilience. So that's probably the biggest component to those pillars.
You talk about forging the unshakable. Is this something you believe anyone can develop, or does it require a certain innate temperament to start with, Mr. Patrick?
Daniel, that's a good question. I think so. There's something that I've seen in at least 90% of the CEOs that I've worked with. So I'm part of this organization called Young Presidents Organization, or YPO. It's a global organization of more than 5,000 CEOs worldwide, and I do a lot of events with 100 or 200 CEOs at a time, and nearly every one of them has had a phenomenon of fear called imposter syndrome. And
Mhm.
imposter syndrome means I don't feel like I should be here, right? Like I don't know why I'm up on the stage. I've got these 50 people who now work for me, staring at me, looking to for guidance, and I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing at night. I lay awake trying to figure out if we're going to make payroll. And so every CEO at some point or another goes through this imposter syndrome. Now, if they go through that imposter syndrome, one of the biggest mistakes they make if they hold on to it is they hire experts. So they get their funding round and they hire an expert, and they get this great resume that, you've got a marketing guy from Procter and Gamble who won a bunch of Cannes Lions, and he's just super connected, and he's the perfect guy. A lot of founders, especially with that imposter syndrome, will say, okay, you're hired, new marketing guy, you take over and you run everything. So the onboarding process is one meeting, introduce them to the IT guys to get their, his account set up, and then he starts checking in at the, at the weekly management meetings, or Buddha meetings as we call them. And that's the worst thing that you can possibly do, because what the founder thinks is he's the expert in marketing. I'm going to let him take over and do his job. But what you're the expert on as the founder is the company, the story behind the company, the why behind the decisions that you made, the who in terms of who does what, and where the strengths and weaknesses are. So if every founder isn't spending at least a month meeting several times a week with new hires, then they're letting something go where they don't tend to propagate this whole idea of sharing the history of the company and making everything in the company grow and scale up. And that's the reason you do the shared belief map. That's the reason you do assigned decision-making principles, so everyone knows how you're going to make decisions based on certain things. And those tools that you have with your doctrine are what allow you to scale up very quickly at hypergrowth kind of statistics.
Very well said, Mr. Patrick. Very well said.
I love the applause.
You
We
deserve
have
it.
a laugh track too. I can tell a couple Irish jokes.
You deserve it. So, on differentiation and the why now, there are many great books on leadership and strategy. What gap did you see in the entrepreneurial landscape that this concept of a creed specifically fills?
So I think the big thing that's been missing, and I think is completely missing in the typical business genre, is belief. And no one's really put a way of measuring or understanding or creating belief. Yet it's absolutely like the fuel for a startup, Daniel.
Mhm.
If you have the smartest guy, maybe the fastest engine, you've got the best marketing person, maybe the sexiest body, so you've got this sort of Ferrari body, and you've got the Ferrari engine, and then you've got this incredible leader, so that's the Ferrari driver. If you don't have any fuel in that car, you're not going anywhere. And so belief and conviction and being in those places of uncertainty all the time together is what helps you become successful. Because remember, you're creating this vision of the world that nobody else can see. And so that's really hard work to get across that gap. And having the conviction and the belief is what gets you there. And most people don't realize that. And certainly most business books don't talk about it. We have this whole vocabulary for businesses, from, MVP to TAM to EOS. It doesn't matter. We've got all these acronyms and these things specifically about the nuts and bolts of business, but not about the belief or the conviction. And the Buddha loop. So many people have heard of the OODA loop, which is OODA, and that comes from a fighter pilot doctrine, a guy by the name of John Boyd, who was the greatest fighter pilot ever, the top Top Gun instructor that we had in the United States. And he came up with this idea that in any air-to-air combat situation, if you observe what's going on around you, you orient yourself based on your training, your background, your skills, then you decide on what to do, and then you act. That's one turn of the OODA loop. As soon as you act, you get new data back. And that new
Mhm.
data allows you to observe again, because you have to observe the new data, orient, so run it through your filters, decide, and act. And what he found was the pilots that got through those OODA loops the fastest were the ones who always won. So sports teams started to develop the OODA loop into their strategy and into their game plans. And even businesses, Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan, He uses the OODA loop in all their strategy discussions. But the big thing, and this is what most people have missed out on, Daniel, in using the OODA loop, is when you're at Top Gun, you know you're one of the best pilots in the world. You know you've got the best equipment that's available to anyone. You know that you've got the best training, the best instructors, the most time behind the throttle. So you have this inherent built-in belief. When you're doing a startup and you're trying to convince your first hire, who's the super technical genius, to come join you, he doesn't have anything to start going through an OODA loop with because he doesn't believe in anything yet. It's your job to get that belief. And that's where the B comes from Buddha. You have to build up that belief, and then you can start cycling through those loops. And the one who gets through the loops the fastest are the ones who win.
Mm, definitely. And if you could get a founder to take away one non-negotiable action or thought from your book, what would it be, Mr. Patrick?
Daniel, another very poignant question. And I think the thing to take away from my book is, if you don't have a creed, then there's no way you can scale once you get successful. So companies that have hyper growth, sort of 50% a year or more, oftentimes fail because they don't have the structure in place, the shared belief map, the decision-making principles, the single-threaded owner principles. They don't have these things in place that allow the company to scale. They might have a great product market fit. They might have, a terrific performance, but then all of a sudden they can't handle the type of growth they get. So this is an area where the Founders Creed gives you that basic operating system that works incredibly well for companies going from 1 to 100, 1 to 500.
Mr. Patrick, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and of course, my book 101 review in sixth season
Well,
this year, comedy 101 in third season, and of course my food 101 in sixth season too, geography 101 love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 our fourth season, and science 101 sex 101 third season, and my baby podcast trivia 101, law 101, mental health 101, motivation 101, entrepreneurship 101, and of course my bible verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast.
Mr. Daniel, I'm going to give you a real round of applause on that, because that's a lot of work in podcasting. Good for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Likewise, I'm inviting you to be part of Entrepreneurship 101, and let's talk about business mindset. Please do come over. So,
Love to.
my last question is, what is the most challenging part of your own journey to forge the unshakable while writing this book? This is the process, test your own creed.
Yeah, it did. The process did test my own creed. And I'll tell you what I think is a very powerful portion of the book, but a part of the book that at first I didn't want to write. So I've started 5 companies, and the last company was called Da Vinci 3.0, and it was high performance computing. So we basically completely redesigned ASIC computing, so Bitcoin mining systems, and it was extensible to GPUs for AI, and it was a liquid cool system oriented that I put millions of dollars of my own money into, and millions of dollars of my friends' money into as well, and it failed. And so, from my personal creed, and you can read about it in the book, why it failed. And you think after starting 4 other companies and having it was technology out of MIT, system design guys from MIT, my second company from MIT, and you would think that having all those things in place, it's guaranteed to be a success, and it wasn't. And so what challenged my creed, which is to help people all over the world create their best company and their best opportunity, was, did I want to talk about my big failure, and could I put my own ego aside to let people know that, hey, this happened to me, and it happened on my 4th try when I should have been a lock, and I had customers that I talked to before, and I went through the checklist, but there are two things that I critically missed, which I talk about in the book that I ended up talking about. So that was one of the challenges: was did I want to really be vulnerable enough and open up myself and my failings and my shortcomings, and I did, and I think it makes the book better.
You did, Mr. Patrick, and congratulations for sharing your legacy to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book, your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Well, the latest book is called The Founder's Creed. And if what we talked about today resonates with you, then go to thefounderscreed.com and you can check it out there. And please follow me on Instagram, The Fear Guru, and same thing on LinkedIn, The Fear Guru as well. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out on Insta or LinkedIn. I'm happy to always share my knowledge.
Yes, definitely. And I have one more question, Mr. Patrick. Sorry. So,
Please.
what are your short term and long term goals?
My short-term goal is to get the Founders Creed published on March 17th and have it turn into a bestseller. And my long-term goal, I think I mentioned, is to create 1,000 unicorns and help 100,000 founders to build their business to something that allows them to have their dreams. One of the things I'm most proud of in my 5 companies is I hired hundreds of people, and those people, because of our work and innovation and ideas, paid for kids' college, bought new houses, bought vacation homes, took vacations, all because of the work that me and my founding teams did. And so I want to continue that legacy.
Yes, and looking forward for that legacy, Mr. Patrick. And one more, can you please recommend a books or books that influence your journey?
So Fear is Fuel, which reading and writing that influenced my journey quite a bit. But I would say there's a great little book called As a Man Thinketh. And it's written by, I think the guy's name is Joe Allen, and it's like 100 years old. But it basically says, it helps people get rid of that victim mindset. It says, whatever happens to you happens because of your actions. And whatever happens to your body happens because of how you treat it. Whatever happens in your relationships is because of how you act. And so, As a Man Thinketh is an easy one to get through in an afternoon or even an hour, I think, to read it. And it's some very good lifelong principles.
Indeed. So, Mr. Patrick Sweeney, thank you so much for your time.
Danielle, thank you so much. And I appreciate everyone staying around to listen. I hope everyone has a great day.
Modicon people, see you soon.